Well, Jonathan, welcome to Unusual Attitudes. Thank you for joining us. We're here on the campus of MIT in Boston. You're part of, our company's Phenom's customer advisory, but I appreciate you taking the time to maybe talk a little bit about yourself. We can learn a little bit more about you. So my first question for you is, who is Jonathan Berlan?
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for having me come here. Who is Jonathan Berlan is possibly a question I have to ask myself every day. If we look at what I do, I'm a recruiter. That's what I do. I'm a very proud and very active father of one beautiful daughter. I'm a very keen cook, an absolute bookworm. I love reading. I'm a man who probably fills his life with absolutely as many things as possible. And I'm someone who probably started their life journey slightly differently from a lot of other people. I have an English mother and I had a French father. So straight away from birth, I was in two different cultures. France on one side, Britain on the other. Two cultures that historically have spent most of their recorded history at war with each other. And I'm sitting there with with a foot in each camp. But interestingly, what this gave me was something which I didn't realize was coming to me. So I learned to speak French when addressing my father. I learned to speak English when speaking to my mother. And I didn't realize at the time as a child that I was learning two languages. And what's interesting is when I look back at the future opportunities that came to me in life, every single one of them professionally is down to the fact that I turned up and somebody needed somebody who spoke another language, and that opened a door for me. So I'm very, very fortunate that being the product of conflict is also an opportunity. and it's something which has been truly important for me. The other thing I think which has guided a lot of my life is not just languages, it's also storytelling. I think it's through storytelling that I became a recruiter, for example. And when people ask me, well, what do you do? Well, in my job, what I do is I essentially tell stories and try and predict the future. That's what I have to do professionally. And personally, when I go home and I spend obviously as much time as I can with my daughter, I try and tell her stories as well. And I guess what we're doing today, right now, literally is telling another story. So that's it. In a nutshell, that's who I am.
So would you consider yourself to be a storyteller at heart, like at the core of who you are? Because you describe yourself as sort of consuming information, right? Consuming knowledge, which means you certainly have a high level of curiosity. Yeah. But some people are curious just for their own purposes. It sounds like you're curious not only for the selfish reasons that we're all curious, for those of us that are deeply curious. Also, you have a strong desire to express that.
Yes, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. I love telling stories, but I love listening to stories. And like I said, I'm a very avid book reader, and I constantly go back to storytelling. It's a driving dimension of my life, and I entertain myself, for example, by writing simple things like restaurant reviews for Google, which is something I enjoy doing. And a lot of people who read them don't want to know where to eat. they want me to tell them the story of a meal I had there, and that's a very different way of looking at life, I guess.
What makes a good storyteller, in your opinion?
Oh wow, gosh. I don't know.
Well, when you're writing, so you talk
know.
about writing a restaurant review, right?
Yeah.
We talk about that you are trying to somewhat tell a story. What is it that you're describing in that experience? Because I grew up in the restaurant business. My father was a chef. I owned a restaurant for a time. I consider myself to be not a professional cook, but a very avid, maybe a little bit more on the more advanced side. Have great appreciation, for a dining experience that could be, a $2 burrito on up to a $200, plate. It doesn't matter to me. And when you're describing that experience of eating, it's such a, that saying, right? That saying that you can tell a lot about a person by the way that you have a meal with them, the way that they eat.
Yeah.
So is that what you're trying to get to, the context of the storytelling?
Yes, absolutely. So, for example, some of the reviews that I've written, but those that have yielded the most interest from readers, are not necessarily about the meal, but they're about the fact that, for example, we had a leaving event. Somebody was retiring in our team, so 9 of us went out for dinner that night, and we had a very entertaining waitress, and it was a great meal. But it was also tinged with sadness, because this was the last time we were all getting together as a team. And I tell the story of us arriving and being full of joy and having this hilarious waitress who was sort of ribbing the boss and everything. And then at the end it's like, and then we said thank you and we said goodbye. And it's that contrast which yields a story. Another review I wrote, and this is going to sound really strange, but hang in there with me, was for a motorway service station between Paris and Brussels, and you go there. It's a motorway service station. There's a McDonald's. There's a bakery. There's a huge car park with a gas station. Or petrol station, if you're a British English speaker, and people go there and they eat and they generally quibble over a parking space and then they go off and that's it. And the food is not particularly interesting and stuff like that, but the location is, because the place where this motorway services is in the middle of what used to be known as the Red Zone. The Red Zone during the First World War. Was an area that was so damaged by trench warfare and by the bombs that were there that for many, many years you couldn't grow crops in it because the soil was poisoned by all the terrible things that happened there. And so my review is a little bit comical and acerbic, but it ends with me saying, look, if you ever go there, spare a thought for all the men for whom that was the last thing they ever saw. Was this place, completely desolate landscape, where you can go there and you can drive away and you can get a meal and stuff like that. A great many men died there and they never had that opportunity. And so that's one of the more satisfying reviews to write, is one where there is a different dimension to what you're describing. There is a, inverted commas, I guess, a punchline. There is a paradox. There is a contrast there. If ever there is a secret to storytelling, it probably comes from that resolution of conflict between what you think you're experiencing and the reality of somebody else who's seeing the same thing and interpreting it very differently.
And that's, I find that to be the context of things, right? Because we individually can have to your point, just that individualized experience, very, very transactional in a
Yeah.
way. Some of us like to go a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah.
I think we search for the meaning in things, and it sounds like that's what you try to do. You're trying to search for a deeper meaning. It can't just be this, right? It has to be something deeper. Do you find yourself at times wandering maybe a little bit too deep?
There's different ways of looking at this. Let me indulge me for a couple of minutes in a different kind of story this time. So I happen to work in the pharmaceutical industry, and one of the big dimensions that motivates and gives us all a purpose is the notion of being a patient, or knowing patients. It's the reason why we would do our work. But most of us are not patients ourselves, so we're doing it for somebody else whose reality is very different from our own. And then a few months ago, because this is something that drives us all in the industry, but a few months ago, something different happened to me. I began to experience pain in my body, and I won't go through the whole details of it, but then the pain came back, and it kept coming back, and what was becoming obvious was that over the course of several months, my health was starting to deteriorate, and I was suffering from a chronic pain condition which was incredibly difficult to diagnose. Doctors didn't really know what was wrong. But all of a sudden, I would find myself having entire days and nights being wiped out by absolutely crippling, agonizing pain. The kind of pain that you don't understand where it comes from. You just experience it. You cannot find any kind of medication that soothes it, and I have spent entire sleepless nights in agony, writhing on the floor of my bathroom. To a certain extent, the pain is like, it's existential. It makes you question whether, if this is existence, is it worth living? That's how bad it is. And then over the course of a few hours or a few days, through exhaustion, you recover, and then you find and you continue living with a fear that somewhere out there is your next episode like this. Now, if you're being tortured by something else, you can externalize that pain, you can identify the cause of it. It's very, very different when it's your own body that's torturing you. Now, this is a completely new and unique experience to me, one for which I still don't have a resolution, by the way. But it's an incredible opportunity, because all of a sudden, I become one of the patients. I end up saying things that I used to hear patients say, but I didn't understand it. I got it from an intellectual perspective. I didn't get it from a deep, meaningful sense of, oh, wow, this is happening to me. And all of a sudden, you end up connecting with a different sense of purpose, the one that gets you out of bed and goes to work every day. Most people would say, please find the cure. Yeah, tell me what's wrong with me, give me the pill, and I want to be okay. I would love to have the pill and stuff like that and be okay. But actually, out of all the pain, there is a strange opportunity to reconnect with a different sense of purpose. And that, again, is a strange paradox of storytelling, that something terrible can happen. And at the same time, it is the most life-affirming experience you can have. It gives you an idea of, oh, wow, this is real. This is actually part of me. And however painful it is, you have to accept it.
It's what interests me in that story is not only it's something only you can experience. You know,
Correct.
we have all, you know, and many people know my story, especially with my losing my oldest son, a few years ago. And while that's an internal pain to me, it's also a pain that many other people experience because he touched so many lives.
Yeah.
The pain that you're kind of talking about here, you almost can't describe it because only you feel it, and only you are going to feel it in the way. And there's no end to it. either, right? There isn't, maybe there will be a resolution at something in the future, but there isn't one at the moment.
Correct.
How do you wake up every day knowing that today could be a day where you're going to experience that again, and prepare yourself for getting through that?
It's not easy, but you very quickly have to recognize that this cannot define your life. And, for the first almost 50 years of my life, I was, in many ways, perfectly fine. And this started on a day, I remember, it was the 18th of June. I went to work that morning, I was absolutely fine. I came back that night and I was absolutely not. And since then it keeps coming back. It started one day, it could end one day. But I look at it slightly differently. There are many, many different ways of living your life. And you can either allow the pain to define you, or you can try and decide to do something different with your day or with your week. Since then, I've done an exercise which I hadn't done for a very long time, because if you kind of want to get a sense or a grasp of what life can be like, there's a very simple thing you can do. You can open a spreadsheet. And I know I need to unpack this one because many people out there will be switching off right now. But indulge me again. Imagine you open a spreadsheet. It's 80 lines high and it's 52 columns wide.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
So, and then you can zoom out from it. Okay, so 80 lines. Imagine for every line, it is a year in your life. In an average, well-lived life, could be 80 years on average. In the Western world, that seems pretty acceptable. 52 columns, 52 weeks in the year. Okay, 52 by 80. That essentially is a spreadsheet form of your life. Now, look at this, zoom out, and then realize that if it's, I think right now it's probably the second week in December, so we're probably about 49th week of, in my case, my 50th line, or yeah. And so you color that a different color and you look at everything. If you do that, in my case, you realize that the majority of my life, it's behind me. It belongs to the past. I can't change any of it. And what's coming next, if I even live to 80 years, all of a sudden, that really doesn't look like very much. And if every single one of those boxes is ticking away and it's a week at a time, that's terrifying. So you cannot let something like pain define every single one of those boxes. Because it's not like you live fine and then all of a sudden you get to 80 and you're dead. No. There is a dip. You have to realize that the last few years, they might not be great. And that's if you get to 80 in the first place. So doing that is a very sobering exercise. So my approach to it is I look at every single one of those boxes and I say, what am I going to do in that box? What am I going to fill that box with 1 week? And sometimes the pain will take that box away from me. And sometimes I get to win that box. And a lot of people, I think, spend their entire lives wanting to have achieved something extraordinary and big and like, okay, great, you'll have done one box where you've done something amazing. But actually, I think the happiest people in life are those who find something to put in every one of those boxes. Not go for the big, unbelievable, extraordinary, life-affirming and unique event. It's way, way more fun to do amazing stuff every week. And an amazing thing to do could be going to a museum with my daughter, because that creates memories. That creates stories. We go back to the storytelling. Similarly, you can have a really great achievement at work, or you can have a really great time. Or sometimes these are very difficult events. But if you start to plot them, you realize quite how rich life can be. And then it's no longer defined by pain.
It's a visualization exercise that makes it all very real, right? When you see your life, and I've never thought about it that way. It's almost like an oversimplification, but a necessary one to help you gain some perspective. And you start realizing, because I'm at the time of this recording, 54 years old. I am certainly on the back half of my life at this point. Probably the 2/3 of it are pretty much gone. And you do, when you get older, especially for, and I mean no offense by this, but if you are a young person, watching and listening, to this, there is a boldness, a necessary boldness when you're younger. It allows you to take much bigger risks, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you that, and I'm sure you feel the same way, the biggest risk I ever took was being a father. And sometimes that's not a choice. It could be because it just happens. Sometimes it's planned with people. But however it is presented to us, parenthood in general, fatherhood in my case, and in your case, is something that changes. And if you have been mapping out, how old is your daughter?
11.
11. So you've had 11 years of her and those boxes.
Yeah.
And I would think that the inspiration of fatherhood, of parenthood, the responsibility, and the hope that your daughter brings you every day has a significant influence even on those most painful days. You could have the painful day, the physical ailment that that you deal with. For me, the losing my son, but at the time having two other sons, the hopefulness in them is what sometimes carries us through. And it could be the worst pain, mental or physical or combination of both. And that box could still be green for the week, right? Because of the external things. So tell us how your daughter inspires you. As a father, how do you contextualize that?
I think like all parents, I think my child is amazing. I think it's an extraordinary thing to create life and then to help shape it. The sense of awesome responsibility that comes with that as well. And the fact that in life you're only ever really as happy as your least happy child, I think. And if your only child has a bad day, then you're having a bad day too. And then hopefully you can find a way to guide that child and say, hey, I tell you what, let's both have a better day together. So my daughter is amazing because I try and give her exactly the same opportunities that I had in life. So for example, the dual culture, the two languages, so she speaks French and English without an accent. She's completely bilingual like me. And I try and teach her the value of answering one single question, which I think is fundamental to anybody who's trying to get ahead in life. And it seems like a bit of almost a trite question, indeed. It's very simple. Do you fully understand the situation you're in right now? So, say for example, you're walking down the street, somebody comes along to you and they're waving, and there's a sense of urgency, and they want something from you. It turns out that they want all the money in your wallet because they have an emergency, and you're getting conned. Somebody wants something from you, and that they're trying to bring you into their story. If you can answer the question of what exactly is happening to me, and you can say, oh yeah, I'm about to be conned, then all of a sudden you have a different choice, which is to say, no, I'm sorry, pick the wrong victim. I know what's happening here. Or, and I give the same advice to people who are struggling in their career and who say to me, I want to do something else, and I'm not happy at work, okay. Do you really understand the situation you're in? Is the situation that you're unhappy because you're doing something that you're fundamentally not inspired by, or is it perhaps the relationship with your line manager, or is it something else, et cetera, et cetera? Do you really understand what situation you're in right now? Okay, if you do, then you have choices. So it's things like that that I try and teach her or encourage her to grasp, because these simple things can be the difference between you making a good decision and a bad decision. But in order to feel like you're in control, you have to really understand the context and the situation you're in. So we're working on that all the time. It's a very simple lesson. I wish I'd learned it sooner.
Well, we learn new lessons through the eyes of and experiences of our children, which I think is a great place to leave this.
Okay.
Jonathan Berlan, storyteller, thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you for listening to me. It's been a pleasure.